Hi, I'm Pav.
And I'm Neil.
And welcome to the Top 10 of Anything podcast.
Let's start the countdown.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ciao bassa. Star Wars as iconic as it gets, but Do Original Trilogy of Do New Hope, Do Empire Strikes Back, Return of Do Jedi have arguably never been bettered. No Liya Do Star Wars canon. GG our Unka Ta countdown our top 10 best moments. Unko Neil's G10 Star Wars facts.
Thank you very much, Pav. I wish I could do my facts in the same language as that. So, number one, Yoda was very nearly played by a monkey. The famous Star Wars opening text crawl took hours and hours to complete and film.
Charming.
A lot of the rebel fighters in the Hoth from the Empire Strikes Back were actual Norwegian Red Cross.
Hello there.
James Earl Jones didn't believe Darth Vader was Luke's father. When the script came across James Earl Jones's desk, the actor said he didn't believe it. I said to myself, he's lying. I wonder how they're going to play that lie out.
When 900 years old you reach, look as good you will not.
Harrison Ford made only $10,000 for playing Han Solo in the original movie. He did manage to secure 0.5% of the ticket sales, which netted him an impressive $1.9 million on top of his $1,000 a week salary. So he wasn't hurting too badly, really. The original movie wasn't named A New Hope until 1981. Blue Harvest was the code name for the filming of Return of the Jedi.
You hear nothing?
The Endorians, otherwise known as the Ewoks, weren't mentioned once in Return of the Jedi.
Oh.
R2-D2 spoke standard English in the early drafts of the script and used a lot of foul language in the process. All of his English lines were cut in the end, but C-3PO's shocked reactions stayed the same. And Hamill hit his head in Yoda's hut in The Empire Strikes Back 16 times before the director was happy with it.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Neil. Thank you.
A pleasure.
So we're doing something that we've never really spoken about before on this podcast. It's Star Wars. Yay! But we are going to delve deep into the original Star Wars trilogy, so episodes 4, 5, and 6. And we couldn't think of anyone better to join us than someone that has sort of literally made the film about the films. Ladies and gentlemen, podcaster, filmumentarian, Jamie Benning is back. Welcome, Jamie.
Hello. Wasn't nobody else was available, no?
We had a long, extensive list, and your name was on it. No, it was at the top of the list. Of course it was. How you
it's
doing,
good to
sir?
be back. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Yeah, I'll keep him busy. You know, I've just come out of a meeting which could be fruitful. I've had a bunch of those in the last few years, but yeah, always got something ticking along.
Is that podcast related, that meeting?
Yeah, podcast related, potentially video production related as well.
Right.
Maybe getting involved with some of the studios again, or trying to, as I've done many times before. We'll see if it comes off this time. I feel like this is the time where I'm the most prepared for it, so maybe.
Well, we'll keep our fingers and toes crossed.
In full
for
Hollywood
Thank you.
fashion, I'm assuming that you can't divulge any of the information at the moment.
I can, but I'd have to send a thermal detonator to each of you. I do know where you live.
Yeah. Oh, creepy.
Could we not get C-3PO to negotiate for us before you let the thermal detonator off?
There are times where, I could do with a droid to negotiate things for me. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Good. Well, we will have a little. Actually, we'll chat about your podcast now. So, how long has the podcast been going?
I started it in, I think, April 2020. So just at the start of the pandemic there, I lost all my work in live sport. I work in live production. And of course, sport wasn't happening. So my job just disappeared. And as a freelancer, I had no sick leave, I had no annual leave, I had no support really. So I thought now's as good a time as any. I'd thought about making a podcast before, and a lot of the issue was about trying to work out the mechanics of it, about how do you do a podcast? What equipment do I need? Do I need any equipment other than what I've got in front of me? In fact, you can do a podcast quite cheaply, I've found out. Don't expect it to make any money is one thing I would say to anybody about to start their own. But, we do it for the love of it, don't we? And that's that. And I've been doing it, nearly 2.5 years now. And I'm on episode 86. So I think, I've got about another 5 in the bag. I did think at one point I might get to 10 and just kind of let it go. I'm now thinking, I can make 100 quite easily here. And things seem to be kind of ramping up a little bit lately. So I'm hoping that, this meeting that I just had, hoping that sort of helps push things along even more. So I'm just enjoying it ultimately. And that's the main thing.
When you started the podcast, before you recorded episode 1, did you in your wildest dreams think that one day during this podcast, I'm going to be talking to people like Dennis Muren and the people that were responsible for making the movies that we love?
No, I didn't. I mean, I was helped along by a friend of mine a little bit, a guy called Mark. I won't say his surname, but he works at the BBC, and he'd done many, many interviews on many, many topics over the years, but he's a real film nut as well. And Mark was kind enough to put me in touch with a number of people. And what I found is that each time I interviewed somebody, there was a sort of leapfrog to the next guest, because they'd say, you know who you should talk to? You should talk to this person or that person. I ended up speaking to Dennis Muren. I mean, one of the first big guests I had, non-Star Wars related, but Star Wars adjacent, is Walter Murch, who, of course, was one of that group of filmmakers, along with Coppola and Lucas back in the day. And, the first person to be described as a sound designer. And I just said to my wife, I said, Becca, I think I'm just going to try and get Walter Murch. And I sent him an email. Can't remember how I found his email address out. He did a talk in North London. I think I bumped into him there and sort of introduced myself. He said, yeah, sure, let's do it. And we ended up doing 2 episodes. I couldn't believe my luck. So I think somebody once said something to me that really hit home. It must have been around that time that I'd started the podcast. They said, just remember, you're no better or worse than anybody else out there. You're no better person or worse person. And just because they're famous and they're an artist and you adore their work, it doesn't matter. Just speak to them as if they're on your level and a contemporary of yours. And that's what I did with Walter. And we still converse today. I get an email off Walter and he'll say, you found it. You might find this interesting. And he's always picking out interesting tidbits, and he's working on a new book. And then that kind of snowballed into me talking to Ken Ralston and Dennis Muir, and these people whose names I've known since I was 4 or 5 years old. Yeah. It kind of blows my mind. And I've got a few more on the list of that ilk coming in the next few months as well.
Excellent. And these guys,
fantastic.
like you say, if you're a Star Wars and Industrial Light and Magic fan, these are guys that you've known all your life. So what I love about the fact that you do this podcast is you're getting these guys, and none of them are getting any younger. The movies that we love are all nearly 50 years old anyway.
Yeah.
So it's almost like it's a great way of documenting stuff. And I think whenever you talk to anybody like that, they've probably done a million interviews, but there'll always be a little nugget of something that they then remember. I mean, I thought the Dennis Muren one was just fascinating. I mean, I love listening to that guy talk anyway.
Yeah.
So to be able to actually be in were you in a room with him, or was it
in a virtual room?
Virtual room. But to be able to just chat to him and say what you want to ask him as a fan more than anything else.
Yeah, well, I do quite a lot of research. I mean, I know a lot about Dennis already. I've read all the ILM books, and I've been a fan of. I've always enjoyed listening to him talk about his craft, and I always do enough research to ensure that I'm not asking the same old questions again and again. Yeah. And I sometimes will interview somebody, and I'll go to a certain depth, but then rather than find out the answer to those questions by researching more, I leave it to the conversation. My podcast is very conversational, and I always end up about an hour and a half episode. But sometimes I've spoken to the guests after we stop recording. I've spoken to them for another 40 minutes because we kind of got things going and things are flowing. And I think one of the first things I try to do is, just talk about the start of somebody's career. It's always interesting to me about how somebody got into their career, but then I want it just to be a conversation, and I won't have questions. I'll have topics, usually on the right-hand side of my laptop here. And if I don't get to one of those topics, I'm not going to awkwardly steer it back to that topic. I'm just going to let the conversation flow. And I always say to them, if there's anything that you want to say, that you want to talk about, that you don't get the chance to talk about, then let's do that. So I always make sure I treat my guests with respect, because I think there's a lot of podcasts out there. They get great guests and then they just talk all over them, and they tell them how much they know about them. That's not interesting for anybody to listen to. So I always, despite rambling on now, I do let my guests talk a lot when I have them on.
Well, you're the guest, so you're allowed to
Exactly.
ramble on.
Yes, it's your
true.
prerogative now.
Yeah, this is true.
So what guests ideally would you still like to talk to that you haven't been able to?
Well, there's still some of those. I mean, to be honest, the remit of the podcast initially, as loose as it was really me talking to people whose work I admired, enjoyed, adored. And it was also for people who don't always get the chance to tell their story. I spoke to one guy who he wrote a self-published book about his experiences working for David Lynch and Dino De Laurentiis on Dune and shooting behind-the-scenes documentary, which then got destroyed. They decided not to use any of his footage, and he spent weeks down there shooting that. And he's a guy that, wasn't necessarily podcast fodder. I've not seen interviews with him elsewhere. So I always like to talk to people who've not had a chance to talk about their work. In fact, I'm talking to somebody at the moment who worked on a lot of miniatures on the movies that we love. He's a bit reluctant because he's like, well, but you've had Ken Ralston, you've had Dennis Muren. And I said, listen, everybody's got a story. We see those credits go by, even more so on movies now. There's thousands of people go by on those credits. Every one of them's got a story. Not every one of them's going to be interesting. But up until now, I've not been to any conversation that I've had on a podcast. I've always managed to get something interesting. And like you say, you always get those little nuggets out of people that they might not have talked about before. And in fact, that's one of the things I love the most, when people say, do you know what? I don't think I've ever said this before, or nobody's ever asked me that before. And it's not that I'm just it's not one-upmanship. It's just me wanting to get closer to these movies via these people, these movies that we adore. And that's what we do as fans, don't we? I mean, you've got Stormtrooper helmets behind you there, Pav, and figurines and stuff. And that's what we do. We share our love. And if you're creative like me, then doing something like this and just having conversations with people it doesn't get any better, really.
Yeah. Is Spielberg and Lucas still like the holy grail, or is that something that you would like be aiming for, or is sort of like, well, no, I'm interested in the people that are like you're saying,
listen, I'm not going to say no. In fact, I met George many years ago, about 8 or 10 years ago. He was at a Formula One Grand Prix, and I just went up to him and had a chat with him for 5 minutes, which was really nice. I've actually trying to get Steven Spielberg to do an interview for a documentary I'm working on at the moment. It's with me and my friend Paddy. We've been working on it for about a year and a half now. We just haven't got the time to do it in between our jobs. We've shot loads of interviews. We've shot loads of contributor interviews. It's about production designer Joe Alves, who worked on Jaws and Close Encounters, but also worked for Disney and was mates with Paul Newman and just rubbed shoulders with just about everybody in Hollywood. And Joe, we kind of fallen in love with. And of course, he was a big collaborator of Steven's, going way back to his TV career, the start of his TV career, and Sugarland Express. So we're hoping to get Steven. We very nearly got him last time we were in LA. It was just post the Oscars. He was in town. His assistant said, I think I can get him for you. And then it didn't happen. But we're on his radar now. So I'm just going to keep chipping away at that.
Yeah.
So not for a podcast guest with Steven, but definitely for the documentary, because it would seem remiss if we didn't have him for that documentary. It deserves input from him. And I think, Taylor Hackford, who we interviewed, who's Helen Mirren's husband, a well-known director in his own right, he said, look, ask Steven for half an hour. In fact, ask him for 20 minutes. He'll give you half an hour, and everything he says you'll be able to use.
Yeah.
Because Steven is that articulate when he gets in front of the camera, of course.
It's unfortunate because I'm using my iPhone as my camera tonight. I've got Steven's phone number in my phone, but I can't get to it. I'm sorry about that.
Don't worry. We'll do it another time.
We'll do it another time. We'll sort it out another time. Okay, we're here to talk about our favorite moments from the original trilogy. So this is New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. Both of you guys, how hard did you find compiling your top 10? We'll start with you, Jamie.
I could have easily done a top 100. That's the difficulty with this one. I mean, other top 10s, I'd probably struggle to find 8 or 9 or 10. But with this, I just kept thinking, no, that one's better than that. Oh no, this is better than that. Oh no, this means more in the story arc. This means more about that character. And I've ended up with a list which I don't think is gonna blow anybody's mind here. They're all fairly obvious ones, but maybe the order in which they're in is the thing. But yes, so difficult to just pick 10. In fact, I've got 11 in front of me here, and I'm going to change one of them.
What about you, Neil?
Exactly the same as Jamie, to be honest. There's so many. I mean, we're big lovers of the original trilogy. We always have been. I mean, we've been banging that drum ourselves, haven't we, pal, for the last 10 years? So, I mean, how did I come about my list? I had to just turn everything off, not look at anything, even the movies, and just go by the top 10 that stuck out to me straight away. And I thought that'll do, because to me, they're perfect movies, but then I'm biased that way. So
yeah, I'm still looking at my top 10 now, thinking that maybe should I swap that for that, and I'm sure that's going to happen. It's going to be a fluid top 10, I think, the way it's going to go. But Jamie, kick us off with your number 10 Star Wars Original Trilogy moment.
Well, I'm just swapping one now. Stand by.
You see what I mean? It's just going to be like that.
I'm not going to do that. No.
My number 10, I've got here the Battle of Hoth.
Okay.
I think there's something about that scene that I've always loved. I love the choreography of it. I love the fact that, coming off the back of Star Wars, this big victorious moment, we're seeing our heroes kind of beaten down and losing. And we know they're going to lose, and they have to find an escape plan. Do they attack? Do they retreat? Luke is there doing his thing, getting the bomb onto the AT-AT, these sort of impenetrable beasts that are coming towards them. I just think it's so iconic. You could see a silhouette of a snowspeeder and know it was a snowspeeder instantly. Same with the AT-AT, same with that trench gun, the turret gun.
Yeah.
I had the playset as a kid. I had the AT-AT as a kid. I had the snowspeeder with a cable that you could wrap around the legs.
That's right.
I mean, the music as well is fantastic. It's not particularly, it's not a theme as such. It's quite percussive, that soundtrack there. But I've always loved it. I was fortunate enough to see John Williams conduct the LSO here in London a couple of times in the 90s, and they played that track, and it got a huge round of applause because it is quite unconventional, that music. In terms of Star Wars movie music. But yeah, I think there's just something amazing about that. And from an effects point of view as well, what a bold move to try and, composite white spaceship or white ships onto white background. There's wonderful plates they shot up in Norway for the effects. Just such a dramatic, I mean, it's kind of a cheat. It's not a scene, it is a sequence, I guess. And there are many sequences within that, Darth Vader marching down the corridor of Hoth Base and Luke watching the Falcon fly off. And like I said, the cable around the legs, just so much to love in that scene.
Yeah. Okay.
It's my number 9, by the way.
That's your number 9. Okay.
Yeah.
It was the first, when I saw the making of The Empire Strikes Back, it was the first time that I think the magic of how they made the movies hit when it showed Phil Tippett and all the guys moving everything like, a millimeter and for the stop motion, thinking, my God, that's how they did it. But when you see it as the actual movie, it shows you the might of the Empire with these massive machines that are just relentless. And it didn't matter if the snow speeders hit them with laser bolts. The laser bolts just kind of just disappeared when it hit. It didn't make any damage at all. And it just showed you that they were and that noise when Luke's just at the underneath the foot as it almost going to be trampled, it makes that kind of
yeah.
Whether that's is that on the soundtrack of the movie? Is that the soundtrack of the song, or is that's
the mechanical sound of the AT-AT's leg, isn't it? Yeah, but the hydraulics or whatever.
It's a horrific noise that Luke just manages to get out the way of. But I mean, that was on. I mean, look, I'm going to say it every time that. If it's not in my top 10, that was very close to being on my list. But that whole scene is fantastic. Well done.
But it's the magic of when you first saw it, when you're at the cinema, 10 years of age or whatever I was at the time, 8-10 years of age. And it was something startlingly different because when you've seen a sci-fi picture before, it's always space or cold.
Yeah.
But then seeing on an ice planet, it became a whole new world. It was something incredible to behold.
Yeah, completely agree. Great one to kick us off. Go on then, Neil. You're number 10.
So this is a personal one on the fact of, I'll explain why. It's when R2-D2 gets shot by the Jawas in A New Hope, right? And now people think, well, that's not much of a scene. Well, to me, it was as a child, because I wrote, forgive me for writing to them, but there was a big competition in the Sun newspaper. It was 1978-79, and I wrote about this being my favorite moment, and then won the complete Star Wars package, where I got the Action Man size figures, every single one.
Wow.
I got a land speeder, all sorts of things. I mean, I've got a picture of me brandishing them all. Excuse the flares and the dodgy background, because it was of that time. But I will send it to Pav, and that's why I needed to put that moment in, because it was I'd just been to the cinema. It was the first movie I'd ever seen at the cinema. And then a year later, probably went to see it again when they reissued it, and then entered that competition. And it's probably the best thing I've ever won in my life.
I'll put that
Still to
picture.
this
I'll
day.
put that picture up now.
Have you still got them?
I haven't, because I mean,
Neil.
in hindsight, isn't it? It's a great thing, and we think to ourselves, well, we should have kept them boxed, should have kept them, and
Yeah,
everything
no-
like that.
no one
But
did
I was a 7-year-old child, an 8-year-old
Tearing
child.
through them, yeah.
I wanted to
Exactly.
play with them. The only one I
Yeah.
didn't play with was Princess Leia. She always just sat in the box. I didn't even bother rescuing her back then in the day. I was a little boy who wanted to play with the other things. But no, I haven't got them. I wish I did. I had C-3PO for years, and then he just sort of fell apart because of the age of them. But yes, I wish I still had them, of course.
Oh.
Nice little personal connection there, though, isn't it? That's cool.
Yeah, that's lovely. But if we all had every Star Wars figure and that we had when we were kids, we'd all be very, very happy.
Yeah.
and not as skint now, which we're often having to buy them
True.
all off of eBay and places like that. Just thinking, I'm like AT-ATs and X-wings and Millennium Falcon. Oh,
And the Death Star.
and the Death Star. That was the best toy ever. The Death
The
Star.
cardboard
It was
playset.
Oh, it was fantastic. So good. Okay, my number 10. This is from the original Return of the Jedi. This is Yub Nub at the end. This is the whole celebration scene, which then George Lucas basically butchered for the special editions, which I could never understand. But it's such a great song, Yub Nub. It's just fantastic. And the Ewoks are there dancing, and all of our heroes come together because they think it's the end, and it's everyone's happy because the Death Star has been, spoilers for anybody that hasn't seen Star Wars, the Death Star gets blown up for the second time, and then Luke looks over and sees the Force ghosts of old Anakin's. Which Jamie, where do you stand on that? Where do you stand on the fact that the young Anakin was there as a Force ghost in the special editions?
Well, I remember when all of that kind of happened, and I was a bit shocked that he would go to change something like that and not go and change some of the other sort of glaring things within the movies. I think so much time has passed now. I mean, I don't get pissed off at things like that anymore, but so much time has passed now with so many spin-offs. We've had the Obi-Wan series. We've now had the Ahsoka series, in which a certain character comes back to some extent. So I think, he's now, percentage-wise, he's occupied more screen, Hayden Christensen's screen time, that I want to see the original films. The biggest issue here for me is, I think there's nothing better to show the iterative nature of filmmaking than allowing us as consumers to have all of the versions. Blade Runner is a perfect example. You've got the original with the voiceover, you've got the work print, you've got the director's cut, you've got the final cut. It's all there for you to view if you want to view it. And I think it's kind of sad that some of the people that worked extremely hard on the effects work in those movies, they can't see their work anywhere unless they go unofficial. And thankfully there are fans out there that have done that for us. But it would be great to get that final original release and to sort of, give it its due.
Completely agree. I don't want to. Neil hasn't watched any of Ahsoka yet, have you, Neil?
No,
I
I
don't
tend to
spoil
wait.
it for you, but I have come to the conclusion. I'm the same as you now, Jamie. I'm not going to get pissed off with anything that's I don't agree with in Star Wars, because I don't feel it's for me anymore. I think I take the original trilogy And
Yeah.
maybe the first 2 seasons of Mandalorian, I'm going to go off in my little Star Wars corner and enjoy them
Yeah.
because that's what I love. The rest of the stuff I can take or leave.
Yeah.
'cause
It's
I don't
to me,
think it's going in the direction that
no.
is for me anymore.
I feel like it's sort of a bit of a parallel universe. Like, what if they made more TV shows? And that's kind of where I am. You know, I'm finding Ahsoka quite charming. You know, there's
Yeah.
some great sequences in it, some great design in it. I listened to an episode with my headphones on the other day and was kind of blown away by the sound design that I've
Yes.
missed out on
Yeah.
watching it on my TV. What I do love about it, though, I went to Star Wars Celebration this year, and I introduced I did a panel with the Andor VFX people, and what I loved was that there's Star Wars for everybody. You know, there were 200,000 people there, I think, over the weekend, and there were kids, there were 70-year-old men and women dressed
Yeah.
up. You know, there's enough for everybody. For me, it's always going to be those first 3 movies and Caravan of Courage. No, I'm joking. Those first 3 movies, and that will never go away. You know, but I love that there's new generations enjoying the sort of things that I enjoyed about it when I was a kid. You know, the spaceships and the lightsaber battles and all of that stuff. But we'll see if, you know, any of these later show. I think Andor was fantastic. I loved Andor. I'm looking forward to season 2. But yeah, I'm enjoying it, but I'm not going to put energy into getting annoyed about things that I don't agree with. It's, I mean,
no. To be fair, Rise of Skywalker beat the shit out of me for that anyway, so I'm not gonna.
Yeah,
that's a whole other podcast talking
that
about
is.
that.
Yeah,
it is. Okay,
I'd struggle to do a top 10 for that film. Let's say
well,
that.
that's why I thought we'd do it in trilogies. You see, because at least then we got Force Awakens and Last Jedi that we can pick other bits out of as well. So your number 9, then, please, Jamie.
My number 9, as currently is the cave scene from The Empire Strikes Back on Dagobah. There's something about that scene that feels very sort of un-Star Warsy initially, but over the years it's come to sort of mean different things, you know, because it's so ambiguous, it's so dreamlike. There's something quite murky about it. And what I liked about it is there's nothing definite about that scene. It's not that Luke is Vader, his face is in the mask. What does that mean? Or does it mean you're your own worst enemy? Does it mean, you know, his lineage comes from Darth Vader? What does it mean? We don't know. And it's never expressly said, you know, this means that. And I like that about that scene. You know, there's something very eerie about it. There's some of that, again, great sound design of the lizard, you know, as he's walking in, that music, John Williams' music, that's sort of tinkling along with that kind of almost synth sound rising as he goes in the cave. And you see the cave and you see this kind of geometric shape, like the doorway. And you're like, well, what is this place like? And we've never really, you know, not in terms of the films anyway, we've never really had it explained. And I love that about Star Wars. That's why I love those first 3 movies. And the prequels came along and started putting big arrows down on things like Anakin made C-3PO and R2-D2 came from here, and this is that. And this, I like that Star Wars sparked the imagination of an entire generation. I don't think we need to have every single thing pinned down. You know, it's like that line, well, the bounty hunter I ran into an Ord Mantell changed my mind. Great. It's just something else that happened. My mind can go racing about that adventure. I don't have to know about it. And it's the same with this scene. I just think it's mysterious. I think, you know, the puppetry of Yoda is just phenomenal in that film.
Yeah.
And I don't know, there's just something really quite dark and menacing about that scene. And I think it's the first time in the original trilogy as a kid where I was scared. And I could still sort of feel that feeling now. And I can imagine, I'm getting kind of goosebumps thinking about it. Yeah. I just think that's a great scene, great dramatic scene, but ambiguous enough to let us kind of, you know, run riot in our imagination.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I was going to say. It was almost like a scene out of a horror film, the way it built. I mean, and I was with you, Jamie, as a youngster, seeing it on the big screen. I was scared. I genuinely was a little bit.
That line when he says, "I'm not afraid, you will be."
Yeah.
Be. And Yoda genuinely looks like a horror.
Yeah, and your weapons, you will not need them. And all that stuff. I think, you know, and what you take in with you is what's the line? I should know this, shouldn't I?
Yeah. We all should know this. You're right. You say you do not need your weapons. Oh, yeah. I know what you mean, though. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the line, but yeah.
Yeah, it'll come. Don't worry, it'll come. Yeah, you say about about it being ambiguous. That's the one thing I love about Star Wars. Like you say, those throwaway things. It's a used universe. So made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs.
Yeah,
When I
it's
remember,
just
watching that as a little kid, and I didn't think, "Oh, what's the Kessel Run?" What you just took it that's something in their world.
it's just fleshing out the world, isn't
They
it?
know
Yeah.
what it is. I don't
Mm.
need to know. I don't
Mm.
need to go back and have 2 series and a prequel to tell me what the Kessel Run is and what a parsec is. It's just part of their universe. Let's just carry on with the story. And there's, like you say, there's loads of moments like that in Star Wars that I think is what fleshes it out even more. You don't need to know. They know. That's all that matters.
Mm.
Oh, great
Yeah.
one. Great one.
Yeah, really good.
Okay, Neil, your number 9 was the Hoth Battle.
It was
from Empire Strikes Back. My number 9 is the Trench Run from A New Hope. I have got another little bit that's it's just the ticking clock, which is a trope that is used in a lot of movies, but I think it's just done. It's masterful the way that it's put together, the way that it's edited, the way that the special effects again, right from the moment where it looks like this is the rebels' final seconds. Han redeems himself.
well, that part's my number 5 is Han saving the day.
Okay.
And I've got the Death Star Trench Run as my number 2, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was lucky enough to speak to Paul Hirsch early on in my podcast. I think it was about episode 6 or 7 or something. He had his book a long time ago in an editing room far, far away, I think it's called. And it gives this great account of, how collaborative that editing on those final scenes were, with Marsha coming in with ideas. And I can't remember if it was Paul or Marsha or Richard Chew that came up with the idea of the ticking clock, because those scenes were originally going to be filmed this, then that, they weren't going to be kind of interlocked together where you're intercutting from the battle and the Death Star moving around and stuff. All of that is created in the editing room. There's a great video, actually, isn't there? Something like how Star Wars was saved in editing. Garrett Gilchrist, who did Deleted Magic, one of the sort of early fan behind the scenes films, he worked on that, and it's a great video. It's on YouTube, I believe, and it kind of breaks down that whole scene, and it's so masterful, that scene. Again, the music is great, the banter over, the talk over the radio, it's almost like poetry, I think. Those lines, I can hear the different tones of those lines, and the way you are in the cockpit with a pilot, and then it cuts to the other pilot hearing that pilot, and it cuts to the sort of radio chatter sound and the static, and it's just masterfully done. And it's a basic concept, trying to shoot some torpedoes into an exhaust port, but hey, it worked for Top Gun Maverick as well, didn't it? Most recently, it's like, I'm watching Star Wars again here, and that's it. We just it's just a basic movie idea that you can understand, you can tell visually. I think, expertly done again.
And it revolutionized cinema. I think that part did pretty much. The effects, we'd never seen anything like it in those days. And like you said, to think we're coming up to 50 years of when this was filmed.
Yeah.
It's incredible what they achieved. It really is. The more you think about it, the more you think, oh, God.
One thing I always remember when I was a kid is, the moment when Luke starts getting Ben's voice in his head and he turns off his tracking system. And the only thing I could remember was Han saying to him, "Don't get cocky, kid." So I think this is him being cocky. He wants to show everybody how good he is. Then think that it was the Force. I thought he's just going, look, I'm going to do it without even using the tracking computer. I'm going to do it by myself. Just thought that was a youngster thing, but it was just such a Force kind of thing to do.
Yeah, I was just thinking, in terms of the impact it's had and the longevity it's had recently, one of these special effects or the visual effects breakaway X-Wing sold at auction for something like 3 million.
Yes.
And then there's another auction coming up with Heritage Auctions. Greg Jean, who was worked in visual effects and model building on a number of big movies from back then. He, in his auction, another X-Wing has come to light, and it's probably going to go for more than 3 million. I mean, whoever it was battling out last time to get to 3 million, they're going to not want to miss out on this opportunity, because they didn't think this opportunity was going to come around again. And you just think that these models were made from, a load of Tamiya and Kyosho model kits that were all on the shelf. They used to go to the hobby store and load them up. they're so detailed. They look great. They still look great. I mean, some of those effects that were introduced in 97 now look a bit rubbish compared to the stuff from 77 or 76.
That's
and
exactly what
77.
I was going to say, Jamie. Is if you compare it, that's nearly 50 years old, and it looks fantastic. The early stages of CGI and that have dated a movie something a lot worse than the practical effects did of years ago. I mean, I think some of the early 2000s, like you said, the prequels, some of those effects are just dreadful effects.
And I think a lot of that, is down to the time frame in which a lot of those effects were turned around. You look at something like Lord of the Rings, I think that still stands out. I mean, Gollum still looks incredible. Like, where are we now? 20 years on? I don't know. I can't remember what year it came out, but those films still look amazing. I just think that Death Star trench run is just so iconic. Even if people haven't seen the film, and there are a few people still out there that haven't seen the film, they know that scene because it's been ripped off in, Family Guy and The Simpsons. And, my kids discover that stuff about the movies that I love via they were watching a Barbie cartoon when they were about 6 years old, and I could hear that they were ripping off a Star Wars storyline or an Indiana Jones storyline. And then there's me telling them, no, this is where that comes from, just so iconic.
Yeah. And this, it's a cheer out loud moment, that the final moments when it's the editing is cut between Peter Cushing there, like brushing his chin, and and then the Death Star blows up. I mean, that is a cheer out loud in the cinema moment, isn't it?
Well, there's that sigh of relief that Luke gives as he fires the torpedo, and it's like everybody just breathes momentarily, like this sigh of relief, and then there's that pause, and then of course the Death Star explodes. And again, it's like the 97 special edition with the kind of the force, the wave coming out. Didn't kind of need it. I think that twinkly music there goes so well with the twinkly little sparkles of the primitive model, which they shot looking up at the ceiling, didn't they? There's just such a charm to that stuff. And thankfully, as I said before, fans have done us a solid and found us original versions converted up into HD and 4K.
4K, just going back to that X-wing at the auction, how pissed off are you going to be if you think you're spending $3 million on the only X-wing that's there, and then another one pops up? You think,
well, the £3 million one was a pyrotechnic one. This one is like a hero version. I'm not sure the story behind where Greg Jean got it. In fact, talking of this particular auction, I mean, it's insane. There's stuff from Star Trek. There's stuff from Buck Rogers, like early Buck Rogers. There's stuff from Laurel and Hardy. I mean, if you listen to the Stuff That Dreams Are Made Of podcast, it's Ryan Condal and David Mandel's podcast about prop collecting. I think you can currently buy the catalog from Heritage. Instead of $50, it's $25. So I think you have to be in the States, but you can download the PDF of it as well. And I just spent like 2 days going through this, just going, oh my God. He's got like original maquette versions of the mothership from Close Encounters and stuff that rightly shouldn't exist anymore. It would have been just thrown in a dumpster and gone forever. But thankfully, Greg saved it. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. Okay, then, Jamie, your number 8, please.
My number 8 is the speeder bike chase from Return of the Jedi.
Oh, that's my number 7.
Okay. I was taking a pause there because I thought you might have that as well.
Yeah.
I saw. In 1983, age 7, for my birthday, I was taken into London and I went to the Dominion Theatre, which was showing the film in 70mm at the time. I think it was one of the biggest screens in the UK at the time. And I remember so many elements of seeing it that first time. I remember going to Hamley's beforehand and buying a Bib Fortuna figure and an AT-AT and a snow speeder. I was still catching up with The Empire Strikes Back at that time. But I remember the speeder bike chase, particularly because I remember going back to my grandparents' house and excitedly telling them about this scout walker that looks like it's drunk and it falls over and explodes. And then there was this speeder bike chase scene. And I remember my parents saying at the same time, and we all ducked, everyone in the cinema ducked when they go under that log.
Yeah.
And we did. The sound was amazing. You could hear the sort of the bramble and the brush going by, the wonderful sound that, Ben Burt found in an air hammer. I think it was the air hose for like a jackhammer. He was leaving his apartment or something, and he heard this weird noise. A stone had got caught in this hose, and he just said to the guys, "Don't fix it. I'm going to go and get my microphone and come back." And he recorded that sound. And it's another one of those iconic moments in cinema. And I love the technical aspect of it with then thinking, how are we going to do this? Are we going to do it in a miniature? Are we going to do it with rear projection? Hang on, what about this Garrett Brown guy who's invented the Steadicam, and it's been on The Shining and it's been on Rocky? Could we lower the frame rate and walk through the redwood forest and shoot a background plate? Okay, let's do it. And I love that, that was one of Dennis Muren's ideas. He approached Garrett about that. I've spoken to both of them about that.
Yeah.
And it's just that thinking outside the box thing that they had back in those days. Another one is the Tauntaun helicopter shot, which still blows my mind at the start of The Empire Strikes Back. Shouldn't be possible back then, but they managed to pull it off. And the speeder bike chase is the same for me. I had the toy, you could press the little bit on the back and it would all fall apart.
Yeah,
and
it would always fall apart too often with not pressing a button. That was my complaint with that toy.
Oh, well, do you know, mine was pretty good. But I remember my cousin had one at the same time and his would fall apart all the time. And mine was pretty solid. Maybe it was Palitoy versus Kenner, who knows? Or just my cousin being terrible with his toys. But I love the Biker Scout design. There's an early picture of those speeder bikes with like camouflage painting and a stormtrooper sat on it. And the stormtrooper, of course, just looked a bit kind of clunky. So they designed, Nilo Rhodus Jamiro, who I've also spoken to in my podcast, designed the Biker Scout. He even told me that he designed the helmet so that it would flip up. And apparently George Lucas said, "What are you doing, Nilo? We don't want to see their faces." And he was like, no, that's for the stunt guys, for the actors, so that they can breathe. And he was like, "Oh, okay." So, got away with that one. But I love that whole sequence. The speeder bike chase is great. You've got Han trying to fight off the guys back there, and you've got Luke and Leia chasing after them, and brother and sister side by side working together. I love those moments where our sort of main protagonists are working together for a greater cause. And of course, then they get split up again, and we're kind of back to square one.
Where we see Luke, and when Luke ignites the lightsaber and cuts the front fin sort of off the and it spins off and goes straight in and explodes. Yeah, it's just a fantastic scene. Didn't make my top 10, but
no, it certainly made mine, but I can't articulate it any better than James has already done.
Absolutely. So go on then, Neil, your number 8, please.
Is the garbage chute in The New Hope.
Yes. Good choice. That should have been on my list. Yeah,
I feel like it should have been on mine as well.
It was always the bit from when I first. It was one of the, apart from obviously R2D2 getting shot by the Jawas. It was one of the bits I always remembered, and it always stood out because it was, it's that bit where you think, Christ, how are they going to get out of this? As a kid, you're excited. Where are they going to go?
It's another ticking clock moment, isn't it?
It is. And then they go into this garbage chute, which you think, I don't know, always looked like it would be good fun in there before the walls come in as a kid. Do you know what I mean? And then obviously we got the dread of the walls coming in, the creature that's in there with Luke. It just all mounts, and I think it's a perfect bit of cinema again. It just shows how strong Star Wars was in its cinematic moments. People forget, a lot of people just say it was a popcorn film, and then you see bits like that, which I think execute this sort of tension brilliantly.
And it really drives the character's arc forward, doesn't it? Because we see Han Solo, this cocky pirate who's out of his depth now, and he's thinking, shit, what am I going to do here?
Exactly, yeah.
There's Luke just kind of thrown into this situation. He doesn't really know what's going on. And we see his sort of frailty when he's pulled under. And Leia, of course, shouting at everybody about, don't do this.
Take command.
And Chewie just, knocking on the door, being this useless grunt in the corner. And then, of course, we've got the moment after that scene as well where, will somebody get this walking carpet out of my way? It's just so many good moments surround that scene.
It's when Han says, to Chewie, what's wrong with you? And Chewie's like a little scared dog, and he's like shaking his head, and he just fires into the that's
and of course we get the firing. Don't do that, boosh, and off goes the laser round and round the garbage chute. But I always thought, even as watching it as a youngster, I never could tell when they're all stood in the garbage and the water, and the walls start to come in. Surely their legs would have got a bit crushed.
Well, thankfully it was all made of foam. Yeah.
Even as a kid, I used to think to myself, why are their legs not hurting?
Well, I thought you were going to say that you couldn't work out the time compression that goes on there. Where don't try it. We've already tried it. It's magnetically sealed. Put that thing away. It's going to get us all killed. When did you try it? Han Solo jumped down there like 4-5 seconds after you did.
Yeah.
So that was of course editing going on there, but I love that scene. Mark Hamill famously sang a song about the Dianoga. Pardon me, George, something Dianoga poo poo, and George put his hand on his chest and pushed him in the water. And he also got his, bloodshot eye from holding his breath so long under the
That's
water.
right, yeah.
There's always these great behind the scenes bits, but that's one of those scenes that you don't see much behind the scenes material on. The making of guys certainly weren't there shooting that day. There's not many images of it. There is that great one of just the whole place empty of water and just all the foam bits just sitting there. And I think the Dianoga's just sort of laying on the floor. But that thing used to freak me out as a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because what was it? That was the thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, and what was the rest of it like, And then you see it, of course, wrapped round Luke, and
Great one. I can't believe that isn't in my top 10. I
Yeah,
must admit,
same.
I can't believe, Okay, my number 8 is, I've put here Tauntaun's Guts. It's
It's another good,
it's in Hoth, and I can remember when me and my brother went to the movie and Han Solo ignites the lightsaber, we thought, oh my god, he's got to be a Jedi because he knows how to turn a lightsaber on. And all he does is slit the Tauntaun's belly so that he can shove. I mean, it's not going to smell very good. I thought they smelt bad on the outside, he says, isn't it?
That's right.
And puts Luke in there just to keep him nice and warm. But as a little kid, that is about as gross and horrific, I think, as I'd ever seen in my life at that point, is seeing the intestines and the insides of a freshly slit open Tauntaun.
I always thought it looked
toy
like
with the little square underneath it, didn't
exactly.
it?
Yeah.
Well, there was one, wasn't there, without that had a solid belly, and there was one with a sort of rubberized bit, and you could put Luke in there. Because I remember my neighbor didn't have the belly one, and he was like, "Mum, what is this? You bought me the wrong one." But there's another great character moment, isn't there, when he cuts open with a lightsaber? He kind of goes, you're like, what am I doing here?
Yeah,
he's just improvising. You really get that sense that he's improvising. And again, great character moment with that line that you said, I thought they smelled bad on the outside. I always thought it looked like bean sprouts, like from our local Chinese.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever read anywhere what that actually was.
Because it's very clear, wasn't it? Everything in that sense.
It's just all yeah. I mean, now I think about it, I'm never going to have bean sprouts again, because I think I hadn't thought of that before. It just looked like tubes with some kind of.
Or you'll go to the Chinese and order Tauntaun's guts.
I must have been a hungry kid, because I always thought the bit where you see Darth Vader from the back without his helmet on, I always thought his head looked like raspberry ripple ice cream.
Really?
Because it's got that kind of
plasticine. If you got 3 or 4 colors,
right,
you roll it all together. But no, that's fair enough. Okay,
Food was on my mind.
That was my number 8. So Jamie, your number 7 then, please.
My number 7 is the Sarlacc battle in Return of the Jedi. I've always loved how there's so much going on in that scene. You've got Luke trying to get to the main barge. You've got Han. Chewie's been shot and he's holding his leg. Lando's hanging off. The droids are, what do we do here? Leia's doing her thing. I think there's some material that I put in my Returning to Jedi that was given to me by a gentleman who was there in Yuma shooting on his little Super 8 camera, and you can see some extra bits of Leia fighting off the guards and stuff.
Right. I will say that I've got Jabba's sail barge as my number 4, so I'm going to count that as the same thing. It was whole scene. So
great design. I mean, I've actually got a picture downstairs in my little, I call it my cinema room, but it's essentially a dining room without a table in it and a screen that my wife has allowed me to keep as a little cinema. But I've got a picture of the Ralph McQuarrie production drawing of the sail barge battle going on, and in that picture, actually, it looks like a fish almost. It's got like this mouth, and it's almost got like the barbels hanging off there. But I love that design, just this idea that there's this monster embedded in the sand, and if you go in, there's no coming out until later, maybe. I think just there's so many great scenes of our heroes kind of working separately, but also working together for the kind of greater good. They're there it's another rescue mission, of course, just like back in the days of the Death Star rescue. I love the design of the skiff. It was a toy that came in a little bit later for me. I'd sort of already moved on, I think, to computers by 1985. And I remember seeing that skiff toy and going, oh, I want it. My mum wouldn't let me have it. But just all those henchmen, the Skifgars and Klaatu and Weequay and all those guys. I love that whole design. And I love the behind the scenes story of it, that George built this incredible barge. I don't know what the stats are anymore, but I used to be able to recite them. You know, it was like 400 crafts people worked on it over 6 months or whatever, and it's on screen for a matter of minutes. You know, it wasn't him showing off. And he says in that famous line in returning from Star Wars to Jedi, the making of a saga, you know, if you build something like that, it's not your job to show it off. You know, it's there to serve the story.
Yeah.
And of course Jabba would have this big bloated pleasure barge, you know, full of boozy aliens. Of course he would. That's the kind of vile gangster he is.
Yeah.
Again, it's just design pushing along the characters, pushing along the story. Fantastic music. There's also that alternate music, which I think was on, if you had that original, sorry, not that original, if you had that 1992, I'm thinking, soundtrack release, it was like in a portrait sort of box. It had 4 CDs in it, one for each movie, and then some unreleased stuff. And there's an unreleased, previously unreleased version of that music. It's not as good. I have sort of synced it up to see how it plays, but I love that music, the music that was finally used. You know, and then we've got all of our characters back together by the end, and off they go in opposite directions again. You know? It's great. I love it.
And the blind hand.
Yeah. It's a great sort of 20-25 minute whole sequence. But once they're going, well, from the moment where Han is saying, instead of a big dark blur, I can see a big light blur.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he said, "Oh, well, we're in Tatooine. There's nothing to see here. I used to live here." Luke saying,
Yeah,
but
you're gonna die here, you know.
Yeah, the fact that Luke has got it all planned. He knows exactly what he's doing, exactly how it's going to play out. It's just a fantastic scene. It's just the whole thing. So yeah, and if you go to Galaxy's Edge, they've got a model of a Sarlacc. So you see it, what it looks like underneath.
Oh, right.
And you obviously you got the what it looks like. I always say it looks like Little Shop of Horrors. What's that?
Yes.
Audrey.
Yeah.
Audrey, the sort of mouth of it. Well, in
the special edition one
special
does.
edition. Yeah. And if not, it's just a butthole with fangs, isn't it?
That's the way we should do it. Yeah. What did it look like at the back? You saying it?
Well, underneath it, it almost looked like it had the body of, if I can remember correctly, of like a brontosaurus kind of thing.
Oh, really?
But going down, like all the way down. Obviously, then if you get eaten by it, then it's 1,000 years of agony or something, wasn't it? I don't know why I'm blanking on. I normally
digested over 1,000 years.
That's it. Digested
pain and suffering.
Years. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay, my number 7 is the Vader versus Kenobi lightsaber fight in a New
That's my number 4.
That's your number 4. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I'm assuming, Jamie, you would have seen when those, I can't remember the name of the guys who did it, but they recut and redid the that particular scene. I would love it if they put that scene in the actual thing because it's so much more dynamic. But just seeing Alec Guinness waving a lightsaber around is always great fun as well. And it was, I think it was probably, if I'm not mistaken, it was probably the first death I ever saw. Although it's not really a death, but the first death I saw that really affected me at the cinema. You know, it was somebody that was like a wizened old wizard, and somebody that you'd grown to sort of have affection for, that all of a sudden was just cut down. And I can remember the like the comic version of the story. That was a lot more visceral. It showed Obi-Wan Kenobi just like being pulverized by a lightsaber.
Right.
It wasn't where he was swished and disappeared.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah,
do you remember that?
One.
It was a real.
I was looking here because I might have it on my shelf, but yeah.
Yeah, it was a real vicious like drawing where he looks like he's just like squiggly lines. I can't quite explain it, but it was just horrible.
Yeah.
So it was nothing like the actual story. But Jamie, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say, and you're right about, you know, that death affecting you, because at that moment when they get back on the Falcon, they escape, and we hear the sad music, we are in Luke's shoes at that point, because we're like, this is the guy that was taking me places, and this is the guy I was looking up to, and he was going to teach me stuff, and what he's died. I remember showing somebody, must have been 20 years ago or so, they'd never seen Star Wars. It was a friend of my then wife, and she'd never seen the film, and she kind of said exactly that. She was like, hang on, what?
Yeah,
he dies. I didn't, but he's gonna help them, and it is a big moment, and of course,
so early in the movie as well.
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing. You think, hang on a minute, he's the big star of the show.
Yeah,
what's
Yeah.
going on? You know,
Well, Lucas really had to sort of talk him round to that idea of, killing him off. He realized he didn't need him in the third act, and it would be far more dramatic for him to get rid of him at that point. But yeah, it must have been quite a difficult conversation to have with Sir Alec Guinness, the Shakespearean actor.
yeah.
Oh, by the way. Yeah. But maybe
Until the movie came out and he'd made millions out of
Yeah.
it. So
yeah, what did he say? Thank goodness for Star Wars or something. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Famously
fair
said
play.
that.
That's my number 7. So Jamie, your number 6 then, please.
This is again, it's more of a sequence, but I guess Jabba's palace. I've got a real affection for
Okay.
Jabba's palace. I think because I was 7 when I first saw a Star Wars movie on the big screen. It was Return of the Jedi, as I said earlier, taken up to the Dominion in London. And I just remember really falling in love with the making of the movie based on the book that my sister had bought, actually. When we finished the film, we exited through the foyer. My parents said, look, you can buy a book each. There was a table there with some badges and books. I bought the red storybook. My sister bought the white collector's edition behind the scenes book. And on the train on the way home, we kind of slid them across the table. If indeed we did have tables on trains then. And I remember just thinking, this is incredible. People make this stuff, and there was concept drawings of Klaatu and Weequay and Barada and all those guys, and there was matte paintings and concept drawings of Jabba's palace by Ralph McQuarrie, and just the iterations of Jabba the Hutt. And I've always been a bit obsessed with Jabba. That toy of Jabba, which I still have actually, just out of reach where I am now. My parents really struggled to find it because it was the hot toy of that year's, Christmas period, and they ended up having to go to a toy shop miles and miles away to get me this thing. So I've hung on to it all these years. It's still in great condition, still played with a lot. And I've in more recent years I've interviewed Toby Philpott, who was one half of Jabba. I've become good friends with Dave Barclay, who's the other half of Jabba. I've chatted to Mike Edmonds, I've chatted to John Coppinger, who designed Jabba. I love that whole place. And I wasn't a big fan of the Boba Fett series, but I loved being back in Jabba's palace, seeing the camera turn just a little bit right or just a little bit left from where we knew it, and maybe seeing where a staircase goes. I just think it's got such a great design. I mean, a lot of people said Return of the Jedi turned into kind of Muppets in space, and to a certain extent I understand that, but I do love those designs. Nilo Rodis, of course, went from being an industrial designer coming up with ships and walkers to being a costume designer, and he designed a lot of those characters and those costumes. Phil Tippett was designing them, but he was heading up the creature shop. He'd sort of leapt up to the next level and was there on set, helping dress the people and direct them, and put cool hairdryer air into the mouths of these poor stunt doubles and things, or stunt actors and extras. I've just always had such an affection for that scene, and it's one of those scenes where, again, our protagonists are walking into something that they're not even sure of what's going to happen. We as the audience don't know what's going to happen. We don't know that Leia is dressed as a bounty hunter. We don't know why Luke has said the droids can be given as a gift, and you've got this crazy voiced and deep laughed big slug just sitting there, and all right, he can't move much, but he is kind of scary still, and I love that voice. I love that Jabba voice. I don't think it's been bettered. I think even in the prequels it doesn't sound quite right.
And even
I
a
do
bit with the Rancor as well.
Yeah, of course, the Rancor pit. I mean, I loved that toy as a kid. It barely articulated its mouth. You couldn't even get a Gamorrean guard's leg in it almost.
That's right.
But I loved that toy. I remember opening all those gifts on Christmas Day, and we'd woken up stupidly early, my sister and I. My grandparents had stayed that night. They said they would never do it again. And I remember going back to bed later in the day because I was tired, and waking up, and at the bottom of my bed was Jabba the Hutt, Bib Fortuna, the Rancor monster. It was all there. And I just have this real strong memory of kind of waking up and thinking, wow, I'm a lucky kid. So I've always had an affection for that, and I've dug deep into the making of. I've just put out a book in June about Return of the Jedi. It chronicles the whole film from conception all the way up to this year, its 40th anniversary. And, I was able to get exclusive diaries from Dave Barclay, who, like I said, was half of Jabba, and John Coppinger, who helped build and design Jabba. and I'm always striving to find something more about Return of the Jedi, Empire Strikes Back, and Star Wars, but just being able to dig more into that scene in particular, because it is one of my top 10. Yeah, it's always delightful to find something new.
And Neil, I was going to say what you said earlier on about like practical effects and CG. I think Jabba the Hutt is the perfect example.
it's great.
I don't think it's ever been better than 40 years ago
No.
when it was a puppet, as opposed to any of the times we've seen Jabba or any of his family
CGI'd him
as a
up
CGI one. It just doesn't work. It's not.
It's the same with
as
Yoda,
good.
isn't it? It's the same. Yoda's got more personality as the puppet.
Oh, it's just more
and
tactile,
moving.
and you can see the emotion there. Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. Go on then, Neil. You're number 6.
So it's Darth Vader taking his helmet off. That's what she said. It's enough. We've spoken about it. It's the end. It's the change. It's the savior, and it's the first bit. It could have been ruined with some of the funny YouTube parodies.
So which time are you not? You're not talking about Empire Strikes Back. You're talking
No,
about
I'm talking about Return of the Jedi. Sorry.
Right. Okay. Right.
Yeah, when he
the unmasking.
The unmasking. We'd seen a glimpse in Empire Strikes Back of his head. We hadn't seen what he was, and it was that. How old was I? 83. So I was 12 when that came out, and it was still then. What does he look like? What's he going to look like? It was almost the excitement, and it's such a pivotal moment of the movie, isn't it? It's the father and son moment, as it were. But yeah, I just really like that. But I was going to say I do have to give credit to that. Whoever did the YouTube where he's playing the harmonica.
Yes, that's.
I think it's one of the funniest things
I've forgotten about that.
Anybody has ever done. So
I'll put that on the video playlist for our Patreoners as well, if that's up on YouTube. For me, when I saw that to me is the title of the movie. That's when the Return of the Jedi is when Anakin is back, but it's like good Anakin, but obviously it's not. I think it's not the Anakin, or is it the Anakin? Who knows? With the special edition, but that for me is what the movie is that moment. Yeah,
it's a really emotional scene, isn't it? Because we're shown behind the mask of this horrible evil character. There's just this old dude, who's been stuck in there for however many decades, and we kind of collectively go, oh right, and it changes your perception of that character immediately.
Absolutely.
And Sebastian Shaw, of course, was only on set for that day or maybe 2 days, and it was a very secretive shoot. And so much secrecy surrounded that, because that was the moment that everyone was waiting for, because The Empire Strikes Back had teed this up. Is he really his father? And who is, right, he's a guy, he's more machine now than man.
Indeed.
Twisted and evil. And then you just see this old dude scarred to hell. Even lacking eyebrows in the later version.
Indeed.
A weird choice. And there is actually that moment where, again, the music kind of gets a bit twinkly and emotional, and you can see that tear running down Mark Hamill's face. And then the line, I've got to save you. You already have. I mean, wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. Love that.
Yeah. You were right. Tell your sister you were right. It's fantastic. Absolutely great. My number 6 is Don't Get Cocky. Is the battle between the four TIE fighters, I think it is. Straight after Kenobi has perished. Luke is in mourning, but Han says, "Come on, buddy, we're still not out of this yet." And they go, and it always fascinated me. I had to draw it on a bit of paper, the physics of this, because they're on the ship, but then they go up and down a ladder. So hang on, that means there's a gun at the top and there's a gun at the bottom, but that means they're going to be upside down. And I don't work out how that actually physically works. But another great set piece where it is edge of the seat stuff, great editing, sound design. For me, it culminates exactly what we love about Star Wars. It's that high intensity, Han Solo being, I love the fact that he says, "Don't get cocky," but then
and he's the cockiest one.
And he's the cockiest one out of the lot. Luke's trying to impress him by, shooting them. It's quite good because they get 2 each, so they're both as good as each other. But then it all gets sort of shot to shit afterwards when Leia is saying, "Oh, well, they let us go." And so I'm like, well, it didn't really matter if you got them all because they would have let us go anyway. So it kind of sort of like it pissed on Han's chips a little bit because he thought he was, well, look at that, not a bad bit of rescuing if I do say so myself.
There is that great moment, I think, between Han and Luke in that, if I'm remembering it correctly, where Luke gets his second one and you just see this smile come across Han Solo's face, like, oh, this kid's doing great, and we're bonding here and we're in this together.
Yeah.
And, despite Leia saying that they let us go, I'm pretty sure that Han Solo still wouldn't believe that if we asked him today, if it's a real person.
Exactly. Completely agree. Okay, we're halfway through, so it's time for this.
Pop quiz, hotshot.
Yes. Now, as you've literally written the book on the movies and done the filmumentary on the movies, Jamie, you're going to be, I would say, favourite for this.
Okay,
I would
but
say.
it's
No
first,
pressure.
it's first one to three. We're going to have a little bit of a quiz. It's first one to three. And if you get the question wrong, it goes over to your opponent. So as you are the guest, Jamie, you can go first or second. What would you like to do?
I'll go first. I don't mind. Yeah.
Okay, here you go. Question 1. What type of dog was the inspiration for Chewbacca, according to George Lucas? Lucan? George Lucas?
Lord Lucan.
Lord Lucan.
According to
That's
Lord
where
Lucan.
he is.
According to George Lucas. Sorry,
Well, I
George.
believe it was George's own dog, which I think was a Malamute dog. I think. Yeah.
Is correct. It was an Alaskan Malamute, yes.
Hmm.
Neil, how many
Yes.
forms of communication is C-3PO fluent in?
Christ, 3 billion, is it?
It is not. Jamie?
6 million.
I'm going to give you
There
that.
we
It's
are.
over 6 million forms of communication.
Yeah.
Jamie, so for the win, Jamie, what model of aircraft did Luke use to bullseye Womp Rats?
It was a T-16. Why have I forgotten? I was about to say Space Hopper. No. Why is that not in my head anymore? I used to bullseye Womp Rats in my T-16 back home.
Yeah, but it's a T-16 what?
I can't remember.
I could give you half a point, and you're so close.
Yeah, why is it not in my head anymore? I'm 47, things are starting to leave my memory.
Yeah,
now.
they drip out.
I'm going to give you half a point.
I'm going to punch myself
So,
when you tell
Neil,
me.
can you guess what the second part
No,
of it
is the honest answer. No.
It was a T-16 Skyhopper.
Skyhopper.
You were so close. You were so close. Neil,
Yes.
who was Luke Skywalker's gunner during the Battle of Hoth?
Oh, I don't know. Jamie?
No, it wasn't Jamie. No,
No, I'm asking
oh,
Jamie.
he's asking Jamie.
Give it to Jamie.
What was it? I need his full name.
Again, I'm going to kick myself because I've actually interviewed this guy
Have
about
you?
15 years
Oh.
ago. Oh my God. No, it's gone from,
No,
put on the spot.
It's Dak Rolter.
Dak. I didn't know his surname was Rolter. I did know Dak.
Rolter. Okay, so Jamie, for the win, what did Owen Lars tell Luke about his father?
What did Owen tell him? He told him. Oh God, my mind is blank. I'm blaming it on the jet lag.
Yeah, I would, yeah.
What did he tell him about his father? I'm thinking of That Wizard's Just a Crazy Old Man, which is about Obi-Wan.
Obi-Wan.
Yeah, he. It's gone. It's crazy.
Okay, Neil.
Is it something about how he died in something or other? I don't know.
No. It was that he was a navigator on a spice
freighter.
There you go. Neil.
If you'd have asked me what occupation. No, I'm joking.
There you go. Neil, here's a nice easy one for you. What was the diameter of the first Death Star?
Fuck knows. I haven't got a clue.
Have a guess. In kilometers, have a guess.
Oh, in kilometers. 50.
Very disappointed, Neil. Very disappointed.
Now, I might know the answer to this because I did a thing a few years back called Star Wars in Numbers, where I did a little montage of things. And I'm pretty sure the Death Star was something like 140, 150, 160 kilometers.
We got three answers there.
Yeah.
Do you want to pick one?
150.
No, it was 120, actually. Okay, Jamie, is this your question now?
Yeah.
Yes, Jamie. For the win, How many meals does Jabba consume a day?
Where was that said?
It was somewhere on the internet that I got the question from, so it has to be true.
Well, he has the frogs, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I'm
I'm assuming it must be in a book somewhere.
I'm picking a random number 9.
Well done, Jamie.
Nothing better than winning on a complete fluke.
Congratulations on the win there.
Wow.
Well done. Well done.
I'll just go if that was in my brain.
I had 3 more, but which word is never spoken in the Star Wars movie? Neil did mention it in the facts. Ewok is correct.
Yeah.
Which Ewok had an iguana as a pet and advisor?
Tebow.
Chief Chirper.
Chief Chirper.
And where did Luke try to convince Biggs Darklighter that he had witnessed a space battle?
It was at the Toshi station.
It was at the Toshi station, indeed. Well done, Jamie. Congratulations.
Yes, well done, Jamie.
I feel slightly redeemed after forgetting some really obvious ones.
Okay, back to the job in hand. What's your number 5, please, Jamie?
I've got written here, I love you, I know.
That's
Cloud
my
City.
number 3.
Yeah.
That's
Han
my
Solo.
number 5 as well.
Han Solo, Princess Leia. Again, it's one of those scenes which says so much about the character. It's like that moment when Luke fires the torpedoes and does that big sigh. We all have this sigh of relief that they finally admitted to each other that they're into each other, and he's aware of it and all that kind of stuff. Of course, it was going to be, I love you too, and don't you forget it, or something like that. And then Harrison Ford had a chat with Irving Kershner and got the line changed. And if you read Alan Arnold's fantastic book on the journal of the making of Empire Strikes Back, it chronicles that whole moment in the making of the film, and it was all intertwined with the fact that Harrison and Carrie were probably still sleeping together. They were hanging out with the Rolling Stones and the Beatles a couple of nights before, and they were at Eric Idle's place drinking some pretty heavy booze, I think, not long before that. And there's the whole thing about, Carrie getting annoyed that she couldn't change lines, but he was changing lines. And I don't know, it's so characterful and it's so full of emotion, that scene, and Chewie kind of howling that he can't save him, save your strength, save it for another time, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And, I again, it was one of those things where I didn't really get what the place was that we were in. It's a fantastic set, with it's beautifully lit. There's no backing to it almost. The steps are all lit. There's so much smoke and steam. It's so atmospheric. I didn't, as a kid, sort of understand what that was. And it was only years later where I thought, hang on, why would they have this thing that freezes people on Cloud City? But of course, it was to transport other things. And they were just, Vader was improvising to get him, transported to the Emperor or whatever. But that particular line, I love you, I know, it just holds so much. It's become part of popular culture. It's in our language.
I have it as a tattoo on my arm.
Do you indeed? There you go.
Indeed, yes.
And if I say to my wife, I love you, she says, I know. And if she says she loves me, I say, I know. And it's just one of those things that's just, everybody knows where it comes from. It's so simple. It's just simple words that we use most days of our lives, but put together with those characters, it speaks volumes, doesn't it?
And it was very Han Solo, wasn't it?
Very Han Solo. You can get those cross sections books where it gives you cross sections of and goes into minute detail of ships. And I've always wanted to see one for the carbonite chamber, because I want to see exactly how it works. Because I know that Han goes down that platform. Then we see a shot of steam. His head sort of throws back. But at no point do you see his hands go where they go when you see the final slab of carbonite. I would love to know just how it works. You sort of kind of see it in the first episode of The Mandalorian, don't you? Because that's how he...
on the ship,
on the ship. That they must have... The legend of it must have travelled and think, well, this is a great way for you to get your bounties to certain places without killing them or without actually, having them running around. I would love to know the actual process of how that works. I've looked online and I can't find it anywhere.
For me, I'm not that bothered about that because it's sort of just part of the story arc. It's like, they're going to trap him. He can't get out. You know, is he going to die? Is he dead? Oh no, he's alive and in perfect hibernation and all that stuff. I think it's just so atmospheric that I forgive all of the kind of mechanics of it. You know, the Ugnaughts running around, and I don't know. It's just, I think famously, actually, they went to shoot, or the set was kind of complete on the Friday, and Irvin Kershner came in and said, "I can't shoot here. There's no background. There's nothing to shoot." And the set builders kind of ran around over the weekend, you know, adding more atmosphere. And I think just by turning on the smoke, Irvin Kershner came in on the Monday and said, "This is brilliant. This is perfect." And they've not even changed anything. You know, they've just added
Norman Reynolds, wasn't it?
Norman Reynolds, of course. Yeah. He said it was one of the most scary moments of his career because he built this amazing set, and Kershner said, "I can't shoot on this."
Yeah. What a set though. It's just
it's great.
Again,
seeing the silhouettes of them arriving, like you know that's Harrison because he's got that walk, and you know that's Chewie with 3PO on his back, and they come down the ramp and Boba Fett's there, and he's very minimalist then, of course. You know, he's obviously been changed over the years, but you know, he just gives the little nod or the little line here and there.
And of course it gave us posters for our bedroom walls.
Yes.
There was
I've got Hanning Carbonate on the front side of my bathroom door. So when the door's locked, he's staring at me when I'm sat on the toilet. A bit too much information, I know, but it's I always look at his hands and his feet.
There was a great poster, and it might have been a Ralph McQuarrie eventually. I think I might have found out. I think it was like a Coca-Cola poster or something like that from back in 1980 that I've always loved when I've come across it online and in books and things. It's just that atmospheric, you know, nature of that scene and that set, just the lighting and the smoke and the steam.
It's beautiful.
You know, Mark Hamill talks about how do you make something look cold? You add steam, which makes you boiling hot. You know, he was covered in bruises and sweltering, and you can actually see him like with his hair all stuck to his face.
Yeah. So good. So good. So that was my number 5 as well. Neil, your number 5 is You're All Clear, Kid.
That's it.
From A New Hope. So my number 5 is Han Gets Frozen. So back to you, Jamie, for your number 4, please.
I've got Luke versus Vader on Cloud City, you know, leading up to the culmination of I am your father. No, that's impossible, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. You know, it's so iconic. It's sort of, for me, it never loses its power. You know, there's been so many pastiches of it in so many different things. You know, there's that great bit in that Simpsons episode where Homer comes out and spoils it for all the people waiting in the queue and all of that stuff. Again, I've seen the film with people who didn't know that, you know, I don't know, they must have been living on the moon or something when it came out. But it's never lost its power for me. I think Vader's at his most kind of menacing at that point, you know, where he's sort of beating Luke down and down and down, and Luke's literally laying on his back, you know, trying to fend for himself. And then we reach that moment, and it's almost like a moment of desperation for Vader. I always feel like he's kind of saying, let's rule the galaxy as father and son, let's get rid of the Emperor, like come with I need your help kind of thing, you know. Come with me on to this side, and not in a sort of super menacing way, but in a desperation kind of way. The menacing part of it for me is beforehand, where he's, you know, he's thrown all the boxes at him and he's fallen out the window and he's climbed back up, and then Vader just appears with this big vroom of the lightsaber across the frame, and it scares the life out of you. And he's kind of relentless, isn't he, Vader, in that scene?
Yeah. And
Luke is really on the back foot, and his only choice is to commit suicide ultimately, because that's what I guess he assumes is what he's doing. He realizes he can't go with Vader. It could never be a possibility. I'll never join you. Minus the annoying scream they added in for the 97 version, or was it the later version? I just think that's such a great scene. It's what we had all been waiting for throughout that film, you know, since we saw the TIE fighter spinning round at the end of Star Wars, thinking Vader's coming back.
Yeah.
Or why is he coming? Why is he important? And then we find out all of this stuff, you know. I think, fantastic. And again, you know, from a behind the scenes point of view, Dave Prowse not being given the line, Obi-Wan was your father, I think was the line he said. He didn't find out until he saw the movie, and he was kind of pissed off. You know, Mark Hamill being taken aside and just given these little sides of lines that he would have to say, and he had to keep that secret for all those months. It's just, everybody knows that scene. Everybody knows that I am your father. You know, we all do the deep voice. I've said it to my kids, you know.
Yeah.
It's the only reason I had kids. Yeah, it's just, again, I keep using the word, but just so iconic. It's just, it sort of transcends the film in many ways. It's become something on its own because
I was going to say exactly that. It's basically become pop. It's become everyday culture dialogue. It's probably the most famous bit of dialogue from the whole of Star Wars, I would argue.
It's probably the most misquoted as well.
Yeah, probably. Yeah,
isn't it? That's the thing. But the thing is, it's also the reason that if anybody who's never watched the Star Wars films comes up to me and says, "What order should I watch them in?" I'll say 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 7, 8. Don't worry about 9. Because you don't get the same visceral reaction at that scene if you've watched 1 and 2 and 3, because then you know who Vader is, you know what Anakin becomes. And that's the reason that I'll always tell people watch 4, 5, and 6 first.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so that was your number 4. Neil, your number 4 was Vader versus Kenobi. My number 4 was Jabba's sail barge. So back to you, Jamie, for your number 3.
I'm doing a lot of talking here.
You are.
Do or do not, there is no try. So that whole scene with Yoda using the Force to get Luke's X-Wing out of the Dagobah swamp.
That's
Luke
my number 3. That's
yeah,
my number
right.
3.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. You know, I don't believe it. That is why you fail and all that stuff. I just think it's so dramatic. It really puts those characters in a certain place and grows the character. And again, we you know, Luke's going in with such enthusiasm to wanting to be trained and become a Jedi, and yet he keeps getting these knockbacks. You know, it's not going well there on Dagobah for Luke or Yoda ultimately. But again, I just love that is a mantra you can kind of live your life by. When I interviewed Dave Barkley, who was age 19, his parents were puppeteers, like marionette puppeteers, and I think he got a commission from Mark Hamill to make him a Darth Vader puppet, and I think he made it actually, Neil, out of one of those 12-inch figures, and he kind of chopped it up and articulated it. And as he was delivering it to the studio, he said, "I'd love to work on this film," and I think he ended up in Stuart Freeborn's workshop and showed him some of his stuff that he'd done. And he then went to work on, I think, the next Monday or something like that.
Wow.
And age 19, he was put in charge of Yoda at certain points because I think Frank Oz had to go and do Sesame Street Live. But Dave tells me that he said, "I know it's kind of cheesy, but I have lived my life by that mantra, by that line, do or do not, there is no try. If you're going to do it, just do it," he says in my interview with him. You know, let's not mess around here. Let's just go and do it. And, you know, Dave had a great career. He went on to be chief puppeteer in Return of the Jedi. You know, he was Little Shop of Horrors, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, you know, and he's such a great guy, Dave. He's a good pal of mine. We had breakfast in Los Angeles where he lives earlier in the year, and he's just one of the sweetest guys. So in my head, Dave is part of that puzzle. You know, Luke and Yoda are part of that puzzle. And I love that music as well, as he pulls the X-Wing out of the swamp.
Yeah,
that's the first time you see the sort of real physical power or the force power of Yoda as well. And I think Dave was actually buried under some leaves operating Yoda in that wide shot as you see the X-Wing, the sort of model of the X-Wing coming in. Just always loved it, and it means a lot to people, that line, I think.
I agree. And I think when you see the close-up of Yoda when he's using the Force, and his eyes are all scrunched up and his little hand is in front of him, again, another one that wouldn't have worked as well if it wasn't a puppet. You know, I think it would have looked too real, whereas Yoda as a puppet is you know, everything's all scrunched up, and and it almost I don't know whether I'm looking at, but is he peeking through? Is sort of looking at what he's doing while he's got his eyes closed, kind of thing, or is that just part of the design of the puppet? Maybe?
Yeah, I don't know. But
that's how I always looked at it. I always looked at it that he was using the Force, but his eyes were slightly open, so he was looking at what he was doing. Maybe so he didn't, you know, smash into Luke when he was moving the X-Wing. I don't know. Okay, so Neil, your number 3 was "I Love You, I Know."
That's it.
My number 3 was Yoda and the X-Wing. Jamie, your number 2.
My number 2. Yeah, the trench run. Yeah,
as
we said.
Right.
Yeah.
So Neil, what's your number 2?
So it's from A New Hope. It's the cantina scene when we get first introduced to Han Solo, the Greedo bit that Han shooting first. Let's go back to the original. Let's never fuck that up again.
Yeah.
There was no need, was there, to change
No
that?
need.
But the
Especially
whole bit.
with what's the thing that Greedo shouts out now?
Oh,
McClunky.
McClunky.
Yeah, that's it.
Then what's the point?
What is that all about?
What is that all about?
Yeah.
It showed Han Solo as the lovable rogue that he is. He's getting rid of
He's a badass.
he's getting rid of that person or that thing that is getting in his way. But the whole scene in the cantina building up, Luke and Ben in there, or Obi-Wan. It reminds me of the magical seeing that for the first time, and every time I still watch it with amazed eyes. I mean, it's probably shocking the effects now compared to what they can do, but seeing a whole new world. Oh fuck! I've turned into Aladdin now. But
don't start singing.
this world that we've never really been immersed in before. I mean, my only sort of sci-fi. I mean, before I saw. I mean, it probably is my first sci-fi I ever saw on the cinema. I mean, at the cinema, I'd probably seen the old Flash Gordons on TV as a child, growing up at that time. But it immersed you into the world, and it's the best bit that does immerse you into this whole strange, long time ago, galaxy far, far away world. And that's why I still sort of hold it so highly. I think it's fabulous.
I still use the cantina as a description. I've been in to bars before and said to people, let's not go in there. It's like the Star Wars cantina in there.
Right,
there's something from every corner of the galaxy in there. That's not for us, Or, if somewhere's busy or somewhere feels a bit menacing, I might say, it's like the Star Wars cantina in here, It's just again, it's become part of the way we talk, especially us movie nerds. And I do love the fact that, another behind the scenes story, that they shot a lot of that in Elstree. George wasn't happy, so they did pickups in Los Angeles. And of course, it cuts together completely seamlessly. You'd have no idea that scene was shot over two different continents. Again, I've spoken to Paul Blake, who played Greedo in the sort of UK end of things. And he tells some great stories about asking George to make him a cup of tea because he didn't realize he wasn't a runner on the show. I've got a real affection for that. That was on my top sort of 20 that I was kind of juggling around the last few days before we started chatting.
It's a good one. Yeah, our friend Pam Rose.
Wasn't
it? Who was I can't remember what her character's name is, but she was the sort of blink if you miss it. But I think in the original cut she had a bigger part. Big domed head, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so that's your number two. My number two is the opening scene. It's the opening with the Star Destroyer coming over your head as chasing the little Tantive 4. Is it a Tantive 4? I think it is.
Yeah. The blockade runner, as I call it.
Yeah, the blockade runner. It's the thing that makes you fall in love with the movie right from the start, because it tells you everything you need to know in 15, 20 seconds. It tells you the might of the Empire. It tells you the pathetic form of the Rebel Alliance, basically, with how small their ship is. And it's just, I mean, I will say, as much as the whole scene with Vader coming in and that kind of stuff is great, just the first moment. I can remember when I bought the Blu-ray versions of the new of this trilogy, and just watching that scene again on like a big TV took me right back to when it was when I was in Burnham-on-Sea in 1978. I would assume it was when Star Wars came out, and saw the movie for the first time. It was just magical seeing that again and thinking right from that moment, I'm in. I don't know what's happening, but I'm in. And we've said it so many times tonight, iconic. It's an iconic moment that tells you everything you need to know about this story that you're going to watch from a galaxy far, far away. Okay, before we reveal our number ones, Jamie, if you want to give us a rundown of your 10 to 2, Neil will do the same and I'll do the same, and then we'll tell everyone what our number ones are.
This is where I sound like Pat Sharp. In 10, it's the Battle of Hoth. 9 was the cave scene on Dagobah. 8 was the speedbike chase. 7 was the Sarlacc battle. 6 was Jabba's palace. I've got minus the musical number, or the updated musical number. Number 5 was I Love You, I Know. Number 4, Luke and Vader on Cloud City, I'm Your Father. 3 was Do or Do Not. And 2 was the Death Star trench run.
I feel I should have the da 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 music playing when we do this.
Oh, fluff.
Go on then, Neil. Yeah, fluff.
Number 10, so it's when R2 gets shot by the Jawas. Number 9, the Battle of Hoth, Empire Strikes Back. Number 8, the Garbage Chute, A New Hope. Number 7, the speeder bike chase from Return of the Jedi. Number 6, Darth Vader takes his helmet off in Return of the Jedi. Number 5, Han saves the day in A New Hope. 4, Obi-Wan versus Vader from A New Hope. Number 3, I Love You, I Know, from Empire. Number 2, Han shoots Greedo in the cantina, and that whole scene
Lovely.
from A New Hope.
And
Sounds
mine
painful. Shot him in the cantina.
Yeah. Yeah.
My number 10 is Yub Nub, Return of the Jedi. 9, The Trench Run, A New Hope. 8, Tauntaun's Guts, The Empire Strikes Back. 7, Vader versus Kenobi, A New Hope. 6, Don't Get Cocky Kid, A New Hope. 5, Han gets frozen, Empire Strikes Back. 4, Jabba's sail barge, Return of the Jedi. 3, Yoda and the X-Wing, Empire Strikes Back. And number 2, the opening scene in A New Hope. So, Jamie, what is your number 1 original trilogy Star Wars moment?
It is that opening scene. It's
Oh,
the
right.
I'm sort of the might of the Empire immediately. I think even though those models were, you know, roughly the same size, I think even the blockade runner might have been slightly bigger than the Star Destroyer. The brilliant effects work, of course, the immense detail on that ship. Yeah, I love it. And of course, the opening crawl. I spoke to Dan Perry, who designed like the Star Wars logo and helped with the opening crawl and all of that stuff. And again, it just we know instantly. We know it's Star Wars now. We see we see a crawl going up diagonally up the screen, and we know exactly what we're looking at. It was the beginning of creating the grammar, the visual grammar of a Star Wars movie. We're in absolutely no doubt of what we're looking at. And I just love the idea that we start a film with a chase. You know, I can't think of a film that I'd seen. I wouldn't say before that, because I probably didn't see Star Wars until about 1980. And I wasn't a big moviegoer. Really, my parents weren't big moviegoers. But you know, even thinking of films from that era or films that preceded Star Wars, they didn't start with a chase. They started with building up the characters and the story arc slowly. But here we're just chucked straight into the action. And I'm all in, and I've been all in since then, you know.
It's very reminiscent. I mean, looking back now with a bit more sort of knowledge of things, you can see where George Lucas got it from the chapter plays, from the Flash Gordon,
the serial.
You know, I didn't realize it as a kid, but it's so obvious now looking back on it. It's it's a great way to open. And Star Wars is a film like others that we've spoken about. I know when we talk about movies, there's a select few films that change the landscape of movie making forever, and Star Wars will forever be one of those.
And it kind of, although George at the very start of it didn't realize this was going to be in episode 4, 5, and 6, it is that thing of like, well, there's a story before all this, and there are chapters before this, and but like you just said, Jamie, you're being thrown straight into something that's going on that we don't quite know what the story is, apart from what was in that crawl. So yeah, fantastic.
Which you probably didn't read when you first saw the movie anyway.
Well, no, it's too fast.
Yeah.
Go on then, Neil. You're number 1.
Well, Jamie's, we've already spoken about it. Well, it's I Am Your Father from Empire Strikes Back. It's got to be for me. Like we say, you know, there's lines of dialogue from movies that stick in everybody's sort of in their vision and sound bites, and this has probably got to be the most famous. And it changed. It was the first movie twist I'd ever seen at the cinema. I can't remember anything else that, you know, had me thinking, isn't he? Like we said, and having seen that for the first time and coming out and saying to my dad, is he? You know, and being like that, it's got to be sort of recognized for what it really is and what it's done to the cultural landscape.
Definitely.
Yeah, great one. My number 1 is Return of the Jedi, and it's Vader versus Luke 2, the rematch. Especially the moment where Vader is goading Luke and saying, you know, if you will not be turned, then perhaps our sister.
Yeah.
And then the choir comes in and Luke loses it and starts attacking him with the lightsaber, and the choir comes up, and that whole bit, it still gives me a lump in my throat. when I watch it, because you feel like Luke is teetering on the brink of doing exactly what the Emperor wants. So much so that when he's slashed Vader to a almost pulp and taken his mechanical arm off and his hand off, all you can hear is the cackle of the Emperor behind going, good, 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 and you think, he's got him, but then he just throws away the lightsaber, says, no, I'm a Jedi like my father before me. And yeah, I mean, it is specifically that moment, I think, for me, when the choir comes in and Luke's really, he's got the better of him for the first time, really. And because he's let the anger overtake him. So,
and there's that great low tracking shot, isn't there, underneath as they're battling off in to the left of the frame.
Yeah.
I'd love that scene as well. In fact, any of your suggestions for your top 10s, I could easily put it in my top 10. We could come up with another 20 each, and I would agree with them as a top 10. There's just so many.
Agree.
Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it?
Completely agree. Just got a few honorable mentions to mention. At Joshy McSquashy says, I love you, I know. I think he was talking about the Star Wars quote. He wasn't telling me that. I don't know. Stuart Turvey said, I'd rather kiss a Wookiee. I can arrange that. You could do with a good kiss. Not sure that line would get into a current Disney script, he says. Audrey Pearson, best moment is in Return of the Jedi when Leia gets shot. Han runs over and she shows she's hiding a blaster. He tells her, I love you. She replies, I know, throwing his line from Empire Strikes Back right back at him before letting loose on the stormtroopers. And I think, isn't that when Han gets a little bit of a grope there by mistake as well, when Leia gets Dawn Sardella Ayres says, blam, Princess Leia, I don't care who you are or where you come from, but from now on you do as I say. Okay, says that to Ham. God damn, I miss Carrie so effing much. We needed her. Mauricio Helbron Jr., an impossible question to answer for someone who was the perfect age seeing the first Star Wars. I remember my 13-year-old self sitting next to my dad being transported into this new universe. But there's one scene that tickles me each time I see it. It always seems fresh, even though I can lip sync all three of these films, including R2-D2 noises, flawlessly and without any conscious effort. And that scene is where Luke meets Yoda, and Yoda comes across as a silly, impish elf until he doesn't. And Luke looks at him the way we did when both Luke and the audience discovered the character's true identity. But I could wax rhapsodic about dozens of other scenes. David Ye says the opening scene has to get a mention. I mean, hands down, so mind-blowingly awesome beginning of a movie. Battle of Hoth, speeder bike chase, when the choir kicks in, Vader versus Luke. Sarah Lawson said Yoda and the X-Wing, the boy is our last hope, there is another. This moment gets me every time. So many feels. And what did he mean? It could be Princess Leia, obviously, but does it? I mean, I would assume it. Yes, it's Princess Leia, isn't it? Yeah. When Han gets defrosted from carbonite and Chewie lovingly grooms and holds him, the best good boy and friend. Okay, one more. When Chewie is trying to put C-3PO back together and puts his head on backwards. Sweet spirit. Brian Toe, when Han comes back and saves Luke's ass in the Death Star trench, it cements Han as a good guy, despite his scruffy exterior, a moment that means more when he definitely shot first. And it also gave us James Earl Jones' greatest line delivery ever of the what? That was a good one. And Sean Finch, I love you, I know. Oh, and Han shot first. I think that's everyone. I want to make sure I don't film. Yeah, that's everyone. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. We've done it. We got the greatest trilogy out of the way, and it's been a momentous one. Jamie, tell everybody where they can get in touch with you, and I will put the Filmunmentaries podcast link in the show notes, so you can please go and have a listen to that, because if you've loved this, you will absolutely love his podcast.
Thanks. Just before I do that, number 11, the medal ceremony. Just thinking of that music should be accompanying us right now, because we've completed it, we've finished it. So I'm on Twitter at Jamie SWB. That did stand for Star Wars Begins, which was one of my Filmumentaries, kind of stuck with that. It's not called Twitter these days, X. I still can't get over that. Filmumentaries on Facebook and on Instagram. Filmumentaries podcast. So it's like documentaries, but with the word film in front. It doesn't make sense, but it is the first thing that comes up if you try and spell it. So hooray for me. There's 85, 86 episodes there with people from all over the film world. Not always Star Wars, but Star Wars is always kind of the connective tissue. They were either inspired by Star Wars, my guests, or they worked on those films. There we go. Thank you. I've take two. Yeah. So if you search for Jamie Benning, there's me and a woman in Wyoming that works in the water industry. That's the only two of us, I think, in the world. And if you try and spell Filmumentaries, I'm sure you'll come across it. There's a ton of stuff for you to watch on Vimeo as well, vimeo.com. Don't search within Vimeo because it doesn't come up, but search Vimeo Filmumentaries or Jamie Benning. There's about 2 days worth of video.
If you've got a link for it, send it to me, Jamie, and I'll put it in the show notes and people can just click on it. Because again, the Filmumentaries, if you're a fan of Star Wars, Raiders, you did one on Raiders and
Jaws, yeah.
They're so good to watch because there's bits in there that you may never have seen before. It's just a great compendium of those movies all in one place. So thoroughly recommend it. That's it. Oh, before we do go, Neil, do you want to tell everybody how, with this music playing behind you,
okay, let's
tell everybody how they can get in touch with us?
Of course I would. Let's do our best. So you can email us at top10pods@hotmail.com. If you've got any suggestions for top 10s or any other ideas, do please drop us a line. You can find us on all the social medias at Top 10 Pods. Give us a click, give us a like, give us a follow, or whatever it is you do on those. Come and help support the podcast at patreon.com/Top 10 Pods. All sorts of rewards where you could even be a guest yourself. Check out all of the links via the link tree. You can find the link in the show notes. And do please give us a click, give us a like, give us a rating, give us a review wherever you get your podcast from.
Wonderful. Jamie, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes.
It's been a pleasure as always.
Good fun.
Thank you. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you very much, Pav. Thank you very much, Jamie. It's been awesome.
Cheers.
Thank you very much, everybody, for watching and listening. And may the force be with you.
10, 9,